We're glad to have you here. This is indeed an interesting moment in public media. Lisa will be here in a few minutes. She's on air right now, but she can just walk across the street and join us when she's done. I'm Brian Moore. I'm the Senior Development Director with KCUR and Classical KC. My colleagues today, so I'm going to set a little bit of a boundary. My colleagues today are from the newsroom. We do very separate things. I raise money to keep KCUR and Classical KC on the air. My colleagues are on the content and on the news side. I may say some things that are a little more direct, maybe, than my colleagues from the newsroom. So you may find a question gets directed one way or the other, but that's just a function of how we work. So let's start here. How many of you are KCPBS viewers or interact with KCPBS?
Every day. Every day.
Terrific. Me too.
Yeah.
How many of you are KCUR or Classical KC consumers?
Every day.
Terrific. So let's go a little deeper into that. On the PBS side, how many of you are turning on a physical television to interact with KCPBS? Okay.
Same.
Yeah. What about a physical radio for KCUR or Classical? Okay, that's very helpful. So we're going to talk about our content and our stations first. Then we're going to dig into kind of the current atmosphere for what's happening with public media. And then we're going to have a very interactive conversation about what's happening. And we're going to offer some suggestions on how you might be able to help us. And I promise you, it is not going to be like a pledge drive. Although we're in one right now across the street, as you probably heard today. This is Public Media for All Day, and that's happening. Wow, doing well. And then here's Lisa right on cue. So,
hey everyone, thanks for being here.
So let's go ahead and I'm going to click through because Lisa, I'm going to give you a chance to catch your breath, and I'm going to let Kalie go first and talk a little bit about KCPBS.
So I'm Kalie Hudson, Chief Content Officer for Kansas City PBS. I oversee our production team, our programming team, our graphics, marketing. We also have a journalism platform called Flatland. So most of the content that comes out of the building are the wonderfully and incredibly talented people that work directly under me. We are really well known for Masterpiece, so and British programming, NewsHour, Frontline. That is, those are shows and programs that come from PBS and are part of our membership partnership with PBS. Locally, we also do documentaries, we do town halls. If anyone here hopefully is familiar with Nick Haynes, he does a weekly civic affairs show. Yeah, he's great. He also convenes town hall discussions, so we will take a national trending topic and have a local conversation and talk about how it affects Kansas City here and neighboring areas. So we are really, really well known for the PBS national content. We do a lot locally, trying to bring value and share information and access with local communities. Outside of we have 32,000 member households on both sides of the state line. We're very proud of that fact. We are, in addition to that, outside of the membership revenue that we bring in, it costs taxpayers $1.60 annually to keep us on the air. And that's some of the funding conversation that will, that's some of the funding conversation. I'm just saying that to kind of inform some of the funding conversation that we might have later. But we think that the value per person is, of course, is high. We do our best to provide balanced coverage. We have been, voted very high in trust in news for years and years. I think a lot of people have that nostalgic, we grew up on Sesame Street and we loved watching Mr. Rogers. So we have that kind of built-in trust. I think that Our team locally they're very engaged with the community. We recently renovated our building. So, and the purpose of that was to be able to bring people in to our space and engage with them, which is something that a lot of other television organizations cannot do. And so we also are out in the community. I know that KCUR does the same thing. We love to be at events and to shake people's hands and tell them about all the things that we're doing. So that bleeds into education. It bleeds into just really important local conversations and issues that are popping up in our community, arts, culture, entertainment, all the things on the screen. So we're really proud of the work that we do. It's amazing to see so many people in the room engage with us regularly, and we love to see that, and that's what we're here for.
All right.
Okay. Oops. Go back. Lisa, I'll give you the same, so go ahead while I figure this out.
Yeah, so KCUR, as you know, I mean, we're right next door in the building next door, and for a long time we were in the same building, so you may have been familiar with lots of us coming in and out of the same place. But we are the NPR affiliate, the local newsroom affiliate for NPR. We provide, we are primarily a journalism and news focused outlets. So we've got reporters across multiple beats in Kansas City covering local government, education, health, race and culture. What else? We're covering wellness and fitness and sports sometimes as well. And so we really are trying to bring Kansas Cityans what they need to know every day through reporting on air during All Things Considered and Morning Edition and Here and Now. But also online at kcur.org is where we've got such a robust presentation of our offerings as well. In addition to the news side of things, we also have a full podcast team and slate of podcasts, including A People's History of Kansas City, which really takes deep dives into kind of unknown and untold stories of kind of Kansas City heroes and events. And for a lot of what I love about People's History in particular is that it has become the historical record of certain Kansas Cityans or certain stories because no one had actually bothered to tell these stories before. And so it really is such a deep level of research and history that it has been able to really shine a light on people who made Kansas City what it is, who never really got their due because at the time they were doing it, they were a woman, God forbid, or a person of color, right? And so that's just one other element of how we put our journalism to work in different ways. We also have a daily news podcast, Kansas City Today, so that you can get all the information you need in the morning about Kansas City in 15 minutes or less. We've got lots of email newsletters that go out the early bird every morning to give you kind of your quick digest of news. And then we're also out in the community doing events as well. Just last week, our community engagement team put on a town hall with Representative Emmanuel Cleaver and Representative Sharice Davids. We invited every single congressional delegate in the Kansas City area many, many times. Those were the two that responded. And we held a town hall both in person and via Zoom for people to ask their questions. And it's that kind of work as well. It was just, there's a problem that exists and that no one's holding town halls and listening from their constituents. And that's where KCUR steps in to try to fill that hole and solve that problem. And so we are going to continue to do events like that to engage people and try to make sense of just the flood of information coming from our nation's capital and from DC, and not just make sense of that information on a national scale, but like what it means here in Kansas City, what it means for your neighbor or your person across the street. And so We take our local programming and fit it in with the great quality national programming that NPR provides us as well, so that hopefully, at least my goal as, director of content, and I was former newscaster, so I used to be the person telling you your news during All Things Considered on your drive home. And my goal was, no matter who you are or where you live in Kansas City, you'll learn one thing that affects you and one thing that affects your neighbor every single drive that you have. And so that really is kind of at the core of what we're trying to do, is inform and empower people to make the decisions on their own that they need to do. Did I get to? Oh, and then the local and national collaborations as well. One of the things that we've really tried to do for our own sustainability and the sustainability of newsrooms in Kansas City, but also as a kind of a general recognition that one single organization cannot be everything everywhere to everyone, is work with partners. And so we work with Kansas City PBS and other nonprofit newsrooms. We have worked with the Kansas City Star before. We have had collaborations with other TV stations in Kansas City, because we feel like working together kind of lifts all ships and creates a more informed public. And then we also have collaborations like Harvest Public Media, which is based at KCUR, but involves Iowa, Nebraska, Illinois. We're getting new partners in Texas and Michigan, pretty much the entire center of the country, and bringing you news from rural areas and agricultural news. I think being here in Kansas City, even if agriculture or farming was not a part of my growing up, I certainly live close enough to, we all know somebody who is involved in that, or know somebody who doesn't live in a big city where they're not as served by a robust media landscape as we are lucky to have here in Kansas City. And so Harvest Public Media aims to fill those gaps. The Kansas News Service was created because across Kansas, if you didn't live in Kansas City or Topeka or Wichita, there wasn't a lot of news happening. You weren't getting a lot of news from your legislature at your state house. And so the Kansas News Service intentionally had reporters across the state to fill those gaps, and they offer their reporting for free to any small newspaper that wants to pick it up. And so that has really helped make a difference in making sure there is a media landscape and good fact-based journalism reaching all parts of the state. So that's collaborations, local and national, have been really at the core of what we're trying to do. And I truly believe, and I know Kalie shares this as well, that we're not here to compete against one another. The goal is to have an informed public that creates a healthy democracy, and we do that by working together, not by competing against each other.
Yay!
So the title of this was Public Media at Crossroads. I asked the question about who listens on the air and who watches with eyeballs on a television. How many of you are on either website, KCPBS or KCUR?
That too.
A few. Okay, good. How many of you are consuming podcasts? A few more. Okay. So one of the ways we're at a crossroads is our medium has changed. When I grew up, there were 4 channels. My dad made me get up and change the channel. I was the remote, as many of you were. But the way we deliver all of this content has changed dramatically. I'll speak for KCUR and let Kalie speak for our PBS, but our terrestrial audience, the people that listen on the radio, looks like this, and it's slightly going like this, meaning fewer people are listening to us on an actual radio. Most people are getting up in the morning and say, Alexa, turn on Morning Edition or turn on KCUR. Same for you. Your digital content, I assume, is growing, and while terrestrial content is doing this or maybe this,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Right. So our business model has changed dramatically. The issue that we have is it's much easier to monetize terrestrial television and radio because we can tell underwriters exactly how many people are listening. And that's an easier sell for an underwriter. You'll notice I didn't call them advertisers. They're not advertisers, they're underwriters, and we'll come back to that in just a few minutes. So part of our Crossroads is the entire business model has changed. The way we deliver content has changed. Our podcasts are a big part of what we do, and we just dropped another one today about Highway 71. If you haven't been,
71 Highway.
it's very good.
It's great. Just check it out.
So let's talk about, though, the large issue that's making headlines right now. So the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Back to 1967, this was a Lyndon Johnson piece of legislation. And he signed that act, and I won't read this to you, but we're charged with creating programs of high quality, diversity, back from the 60s. It's not allowed to be in that conversation now. Creativity, excellence, and innovation. That's our charge, and we're supposed to be doing it free for all. One thing that's important about the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is that third bullet point. It doesn't just simply put us on the air. In fact, it does very little for our budgets, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is how these networks are stitched together. So how does Masterpiece Theater get to us? How does the programming we purchase from NPR National or WBUR or WBZ, how does that come to be here? Corporation for Public Broadcasting in many ways is responsible for that network that delivers all of this content to, I think it's 99.7% of the country for free. The federal appropriation in 2025 would not buy a military jet. It just wouldn't. And you'll see some of the numbers here, but 70% of their funding goes to fund the 1,500 local stations. I'll talk about, you can see in the third bullet point, the averages for KCUR, CPB funding is only 4% of our $10 million budget. It's not a big number. And you said to me, yours is
13%.
13%. So CPB funding is 75% for television and 25% for radio. That's just the way it was divided up in the legislation. I think this is important, and Kalie said something about this. The funding costs each American taxpayer just $1.60 annually. So less than a cup of coffee is what it costs each American to get this service. And I think the third bullet point is important too. It's a really good partnership because every dollar CPB provides, our organizations generate another it's between $7 and $8 in support. So that tiny investment from Congress turns into a significant amount of investment here locally. So let's talk about the threats. And I do think all of these are important, and things have changed. I think all this is up to date. So we started, well, I should have put the original bullet point up here. The current administration in 1.0, so the last Trump administration tried the same thing. They tried to defund the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. They were not successful at the congressional level. When Project 2025 came out, and this is the part where I'm the fundraiser, they're the news people, so I'll start editorializing here a lot more. Despite the fact that the president said he knew nothing about 2025, it did call for the defunding of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. It was very explicit. In January, the new Trump appointee to the FCC started looking at how our underwriting works, saying that we're basically running commercials. That's an important point because if it were to happen that the FCC said that we were running commercials instead of underwriting. And by the way, we've been following the underwriting guidance to the letter. Both organizations have. NPR would not be fined. The individual stations would be fined. So every ad I just said it, every underwriting spot that we run, if they were found to be commercials instead of underwriting, the fine would come to KCUR and not NPR. Or the fine would go to PBS or to KCPBS, not to national. So they're trying to undercut that method of funding. If you watched this comedy show with the hearing with Marjorie Taylor Greene, and you can see the title there, Anti-American Airwaves. That was an attempt to get, well, it was frankly an attempt to get the CEOs of NPR and PBS to say something that they would be held to account for. Then the statement from the White House on April 14th was awful. It cherry-picked just a ton of work that had been done over the last few years and called it trash. Talked about intolerance of non-leftist viewpoints, any number of things. Then on April 15th, NPR reported that the administration has drafted a memo to cut $1.1 billion, so essentially the next 2 years of funding for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. A little bit of a backstory there. CPB was initially set up and over the years was funded 2 years in advance so it could avoid this sort of political back and forth. So if a new administration came in and said, we don't want any more of this kind of content, the funding is 2 years out in advance. The White House's attempt is not supposed to be able to happen because it's a congressional appropriation. However, what we have seen, again, editorializing, is that the administration does not seem to be bound by convention or the law or separation of powers. So we were anticipating a memo on April the 28th, so Monday, to cut funding for the next 2 years. It appears that decision has been pulled back, and they're going to try to take out the funding through the reconciliation process with Congress.
Oh, really?
So that appears to be the current move. We also heard this week that it's going to be lumped in with USAID for some reason. So just keep a lookout. We're reporting on it. Are you reporting on any of this on your website? I can't remember if you were.
Yes, we
Okay.
have information.
Okay, so we'll continue to report on it, but that's what we're up against at the moment.
And we've got we've pulled in lots of national reporting on these things, but I think it's also, to Brian's point, important to remember that the target's moving all the time. And so we're trying to plan for 10 different possible scenarios of how this funding could be taken away. We know what the goal is. Remove federal funding for
Right.
PBS and for NPR. The means by how they would accomplish that is constantly moving. So it's hard for us even to keep up. So
Yeah.
How's public broadcasting's responsibility to broadcast emergency communications been factored into the equation anywhere?
Yeah.
As in Washington?
It's a subtlety. There's a right.
I don't think it's subtle at all.
This administration is more subtle than the last in some ways, in that objection. So a lot of how emergency broadcast messaging happens is right through over the airwaves, because if the internet goes down, if phones go down, that's the only means we have. In fact, during the hurricanes in North Carolina, it was rather famously reported that our towers that were broadcasting radio signals were the only source of information for the people affected by the flooding.
Right.
So, the White House is currently trying to move emergency broadcast system considerations over to the Department of Commerce.
But they don't have any
Right.
radio stations or
Correct,
TV.
they don't.
Mhm.
But it's a
So-
way to overcome the objections
Right.
within the bounds of actual legislation.
Okay.
On Monday, President Trump removed 3 of the 5 board members for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. They fired a lawsuit, but the CPB, under that removal, can no longer effectively function with just 2 board members.
Mhm.
So it's first of all, it's a hatchet, then it's also a death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? All at the same time, as this entire situation has been. So let's talk about what all of this means if this were to go away. For us, I'll start with us, Lisa. It's 4% of our budget. Like, I can fundraise us out of that, right? The issue is nationally, the smaller stations. I grew up in Hutchinson, Kansas. The smaller stations in the network, it's a disproportionate part of their budget. Many small stations in this country will cease to exist. If CPB funding is 40, 50, 60% of your budget, you go away. Those stations can't fundraise themselves back to solvency. I know same thing
Yes.
for PBS.
It's 13% of our budget. We would likely have to cut back on certain services and content that we create locally. We also have program acquisitions outside of our dues with PBS that we look at annually. So extras for viewers, we would likely cut those back. But Warrensburg, 40% of their budget is through CPB, so they would maybe have a problem. Some of the more rural stations, like Brian said, would go away because they just can't stay open with 50, 60% of their budget gone.
Right, so it affects the network. It will probably also affect, so if you're left with the larger stations, and remember, our signals reach 99.7% of the country. So we're cutting out a chunk of the country who rely on this content to get the news that they need, because as Lisa said, in rural parts of Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, wherever, we're the only thing that's available over a terrestrial signal.
I'm just curious, in rural areas, do people not listen to PBS and NPR proportionally like they do in the urban areas, or why is their funding so much?
There's just fewer people.
Yeah, it's just.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there are fewer people, but they've still got a listening area, and I would think that they're funded according to their population. Is that not how it works?
I don't know the
From the
formula,
federal?
or I don't know the formula of how they do it. I can tell you that our ability to raise funds here locally, so we create content that gets delivered nationally. Some of our stories get picked up by All Things Considered or Morning Edition. Those stations aren't creating content; they're receiving content and they're purchasing content. I won't speak for either one of you. My experience with rural, at least NPR stations, is that they often have 1 or 2 programs, and then they become a music format during the
Yes.
day.
Right.
That's
I think
true.
it's less, I mean, it's also a matter of staff size in these rural stations. If there are 2 or 3 people, there simply isn't capacity to fundraise or market the way that we do at KCUR. And if you've got, some of these stations maybe have 1 journalist and then a program director and someone just running the boards. And so the capacity to get underwriting or to fundraise is just limited, which is why they rely so much on the federal fund. So I don't think it is necessarily a lack of listenership or interest, but a lack of staff and ability to leverage that and turn it into revenue for the station. But that is my observation.
Could we go a little deeper on this? Could you both like talk about what it takes to put on Nick's show and maybe talk about what it takes to put on Steve's show? Just in terms of staffing and you both have some insight into that I don't.
Sure. Yeah.
Sure. So Up to Date, obviously it's hosted by Steve Kraske. He has a team of four producers right now. So it's Zach Wilson is the senior producer. And we've got three other producers, Claudia Brancart, Hallie Jackson, and Liz Ruiz. And they are all, and then usually we have an intern. We're in between interns right now. And so that's a team of 5, and his producers are constantly searching for what conversations do we need to fill this hour? What's happening in Kansas City that we need to bring to the air? And then they're calling and trying to book those shows with the experts, the subject matter experts or lawmakers, needed to address those questions. And so if you're thinking 1 hour of radio programming, that means we've got maybe 3 or 4 different 10-minute segments, different conversations that someone's in charge of, calling, doing what we call a pre-interview. So it's almost like a screening interview to help Steve generate his script and his questions for that specific segment, working out different schedules. All right, so-and-so isn't available for Monday's show. They could come on for 12 and a half minutes on Thursday. Can we do that? But who's going to fill this hole on Monday? And so it's kind of a puzzle putting it all together. And then they often also rely on KCUR reporters and the work that we are doing in the newsroom. And so that's a whole different kind of, when you talk about resources, the time that our own reporters have done to research and write and produce a story and then come on to talk about it on Up to Date as well. And then during that hour, we've got someone taking calls from listeners, also talking to our announcers that are, getting ready to do our breaks, our Paul Nakachuras, Michael Byers, and Lori Arbor, talking to them during the show, chatting with Steve during the show, taking calls. And then once all of that is done, they are listening to it, turning that into a little podcast post to fill the podcast feed. So if you didn't hear it live, you can hear it on demand, or you can rebroadcast it later tonight. So it's a constant churn of work, and a lot of people who are putting time into a single hour to make sure that Steve knows what he's talking about when he's interviewing the mayor, right?
You'll do a really good job at that too.
Thank you. And I don't want to downplay Steve's own expertise. He does know what he's talking about, but he has a lot of help too.
And I heard on the way in, it costs $695 per day to put
Per
on.
day for that 1 hour.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just adding that. Just want to help out.
How many hours to produce his 1 hour?
I mean, it's hard to quantify, but I mean, I would say it takes 5 people, a 40-hour work week to fill the 5 hours of Up to Date that are on air every day. Mm-hmm.
So if any of you listened to 1A, we had Jen White in this at the station last year, I guess it was.
Yeah.
She does 2 hours a day nationally. She has a staff of, what did she say, 15 producers, full-time producers that are working at it every day. So all of these shows require a significant amount of person power to get them on and deliver the content we can. What's the scale with Nick's show?
I would say there are probably 20 different people on our team that touch a single episode of Week in Review. So Nick he's incredible.
There's a line.
Really
Nick does so
Yeah.
much.
He does all the planning with a part-time production assistant that helps him coordinate some things, but he does a lot of that himself, which is not really indicative of the industry. Like Brian said, you would have way more people. Generally, we are known to scale things, right, for our operations. And luckily we have partners like Lisa who come on as panelists weekly. So we have a really nice group of folks that kind of rotate in and out to add context to some of these conversations. But, when you're talking about producing for digital audiences, it's, we're sending it to broadcast. We're also, like Lisa said, we're putting it on social media, we're putting it on YouTube, we have a video app. We're trying to meet as many people as we can where they're at, where they watch, to get the information out. There's a lot of back end stuff that goes along with that. You have to add metadata to make it searchable. You have to have descriptions and thumbnails. And there's just like all these tiny little pieces. I think one thing that we also didn't talk about is in our industry, because things are changing so quickly, equipment and technology are an incredible expense that is just not, it's unheard of for some of these smaller stations. They just would not be able to accommodate it. So we just recently, I wrote a couple of grants to bring in, I think totaling close to 2 million to upgrade our studio spaces. I know it sounds like so much money, doesn't it? But it's not. It's not at all. It goes very quickly. Well, a lot of it was through a grant from Kansas, we were incredibly lucky to be involved in that. But we replaced our lights and light grid. Those were from the 50s. Our light board still had mercury in it. That's how the conduction went through. So you would flip a switch and it was still working. We were using it. We have it as a novelty item now. We're gonna we kept it. But I think that's a huge expense that stations just we were struggling to cover that. And we had to also, once you get into these conversations about technology upgrades, they're like, oh, you forgot this one piece and that's going to be another 20,000 and so you're kind of scrambling after something's been designed to try and, supplement. So I think that's probably, at least for television, I know, and likely for radio also, it's huge.
Yeah, it's amazing how fast that'll eat up a budget, is having to replace equipment.
Yes.
Yes. So I'm going to take a diversion now and go just a quick set, not a quick, but a separate place for the changing landscape. During pandemic, PBS finished up the fundraising for their new space. And if you haven't been in there, it's wonderful. There's Oscar the Grouch in the trash can right when you walk in the door, and Big Bird on the right. And it's a great space. You can engage with your audience. You have great studios. Meanwhile, KCUR is over here in the Soviet-style gulag that has been slated for demolition for 15 years. We've actually been told if the air conditioner breaks this summer, we'll have to find a new place to go. So that aside, that was just some complaining. But so we started a campaign in 2023 to build a new building, to get out of there, also to modernize what we have and be able to interact with our audience. We realized during that conversation that our donors weren't going to give money. So the University of Missouri holds our licenses, our broadcast licenses. PBS is a separate standalone community entity that owns their own. Our conversation with the university was from our donors that said, hey, what happens if we raise this money, we build this $30 million building, and then the university says, you know what, the heck with NPR, you guys are out. And the university said, well, we get a new math building. And it was said kindly, and it was said.
The university said that.
Yeah, and it was said respectfully. But our donors then said, well, we need to think about something else. So we are currently in negotiation with the university, and this is not a secret. We're in negotiation with the university to set up a community entity like PBS to take the broadcast licenses from the university and set up our own 501c3. There are lots of advantages there. It's scary from a fundraising perspective because we won't have the university as a safety net in terms of HR, IT, cleaning the building even. And
Utilities.
So, yeah, right, replacing the air conditioner. we're in that process, but I can tell you a couple of things. One is it's the best place for KCUR and classical. It gives us editorial independence. We've had a minor issue. We've had to take DEI off of all of we've had to scrub our website of all those considerations. Other stations in the country that are university licensees have had direct challenges from their universities about what they can and can't broadcast. In fact, our drive today, we have feedback from colleagues in the country whose universities have told them you may not fundraise off of this. So there's a chilling effect, especially with stations that are tied to universities, and it's political games, right? So that's the best place for us to be. The other piece too is it gives us financial independence as well. We're tied to some of the university's fundraising processes, and being able to get free from that gives us a lot more flexibility. We can't, the most common form of payment for many of my nonprofit colleagues in the community is someone Venmoing the money. We can't use those means to even raise money because of the university. They have been terrific partners to us. They're being fair negotiators, and we'll get this done. But that's what's happening also for KCUR against this backdrop. So again, multiple things where we're at the crossroads.
Brian, has there ever been any discussion about creating an umbrella 501c3 in Kansas City that would encompass both KCUR and KCPT which is the setup that you can find in many cities? I'm just curious.
I'm going to plead the fifth mostly, but I will tell you everything for us, every possibility is a possibility right now.
Okay.
Our community organization is being led by 3 individuals who will become the board of directors, will become Lisa's and my boss once this gets set up. They're looking at every possibility. The one thing that I think is off the table is we're probably not going to go build our building on the UMKC campus anymore.
Probably not.
Probably not, right? So I'll come back to you. We're looking at every possibility for the next generation. And I think there's a subtlety to this too. All public media has traditionally been a very transactional means of fundraising. So if you give us $20 a month, we'll give you Masterpiece Theater or give you All Things Considered.
And a tote bag.
And a tote bag. By the way, if you haven't seen it, if you're so inclined, Catherine Marr, who's the president or the CEO of NPR, was on the Daily Show this week. And there's a tote bag in that interview that's absolutely delightful. I recommend it. It's about a 9-minute interview. So we've been very transactional. The stations nationally, and I assume this is the same case with PBS, the stations nationally from whom we buy content have become very, very effective fundraisers. They're not just talking to folks about, could you just help us get this programming on the air? They're talking about, can you make us a program producer? And that takes a significant philanthropic investment. So what does it cost for All Things Considered? Isn't it like $300,000 a year?
Something like that. Yeah.
So these stations are having donors actually underwrite that for, an individual donor say, I've got All Things Considered for the next 5 years. That level of fundraising is what we'll have to get to. The symphony has done it here in town. The ballet has done it here in town. We're going to have to put ourselves in the same position as those organizations to preserve this as a community asset. So that's part of moving away from the university as well. There's a question in the back.
You presented the financial costs associated with running both agencies. If you create a 501c3 for the radio side, what's the impact on the comparing apple and orange, you're much cheaper right now. If we create a 501c3, a parent organization, something to hold your license, how does that affect your budget?
That is a good question. It's mostly above my pay grade to.
I've got a little bit of help there.
Yeah.
So what we'll have to make up for is the cost for where we live and what it costs are in university support. The university gives us almost no cash, so it's all in-kind contributions. We don't have a full answer. We're working on a pro forma right now of what that will be. If I had to, I'm not a betting person. If I had to bet, I would say it's probably going to cost us an extra $1.5 million or so a year to run the organization out in the wild. Now, there are also efficiencies with not being tied to a state agency.
Yes.
Things cost less when you don't have a bureaucracy of 50,000 employees. On the flip side of that, we're going to struggle to offer the same kind of benefits to our employees. So we're trying to find some efficiencies out there. And for example, there are companies that run in the entire back office function for other public media organizations in the country. So it's possible we could contract with someone at a almost wash level cost. So we know it will be more expensive, but we have the freedom to look for as many efficiencies as possible. So I can't give you the exact number. When we have all of this done, we will have a campaign which will describe exactly what it will cost for us to do this and what we're going to need to raise to make it happen. And it's
Thankful for people who can answer that question like Brian so that I can just write nice words.
That's right. Yep. Other question? Yes, me.
If you start getting federal funding, would you be able to live stream on Spotify?
That's not a question for me. I don't know.
If we were to lose federal funding and lose kind of that infrastructure for broadcast, there are ways I think we could still stream and be, I guess, an internet or on-demand service for content. I'm not sure if Spotify would be the venue or YouTube or whatever. I think we have the capacity for it, but the strength and availability of that would be a challenge for us because without the greatest platform for people that people know where to reach us, it puts the onus on people to find us someplace else. So I think, yes, we have the capacity for it, but do we have the capacity? I mean, would we be able to bring in the same national programs to that same format? That's a question I don't know the answer to, whether we could still fit in as seamlessly with all things considered. Right now, when you listen to KCUR, we've got our local personalities and programs going on, and we seamlessly cut to national programming that is also live. And so that capacity and that kind of coordination would be, I think, a huge task for us. So I think some streaming and our content produced by KCUR, I think, could still be available, but I'm not sure what it would take to have kind of the 24-hour clock of coverage that we have now.
That consistent with your?
Is what?
Just are there other platforms that in a dire situation that PBS could transition to get its content out, or is that even a consideration?
I mean, we do use the video platform through PBS, and there's also a member streaming service. But we put our stuff on YouTube. We also have a live stream that you can click.
Right.
So.
And yeah, because we don't use video except for
Yeah.
occasional phone recording
Yeah.
on our social media platforms. Any other questions specific to the transition or anything we've come up to this point?
What can we do? Yeah.
Yeah, what's gonna
Funny
happen?
you should ask. Let me talk about our collective responses, and Kelly and I had this conversation with a group of people from both entities last week. So we're being fairly cautious right now, and for a good reason. What we can't do with our listeners and our viewers and our donors is we can't be Chicken Little. Because if this administration has shown us nothing else, we can't anticipate exactly what they'll do. We have hints, we have ideas. This could go anywhere from we're cutting Corporation for Public Broadcasting completely out. It's gone. The 535 million is completely gone. Deal with it. Congress could come in and say, wait a minute, we don't do that. I mean, we have Josh Hawley on sometimes. We have people on. We have people on from all over the political spectrum, and some use us as a platform to get their side of it out. That's what we say we are, and that's what we deliver. So Congress could.
Yeah, I heard Josh Hawley say he wants to protect Missouri Medicaid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Josh Hawley.
Yeah.
Right.
You never know, it's gonna come out of his mouth.
So we don't know what we're going to get here. So what we're trying to do right now is what you see up on the screen is we have some resources, and I'll give you the websites here in just a second. We're taking the position that right now is the opportunity to do exactly what we're doing today, which is talk to people who listen to us and care about us and say, these are the threats. This is what's currently underway. Once we understand what's going to come from the White House, we will take a more aggressive position about, okay, the threat is this. This is what the White House is calling for. It's time to start moving into action. Then there's another if then. So if that goes to Congress and they ignore it and keep funding in place, we'll just keep being advocates and say, protect this resource. If Congress does go ahead and cut, both organizations are prepared to go on the air. We're prepared to go on the air. You all probably, well, you might do it on next show, right?
Are you saying funding request?
Yeah.
We wouldn't do that likely on the show, but
Yeah.
we'd do
Okay.
promos, yeah.
Okay. We'll go on the air and say, we need to raise $500,000 to overcome this over the next however many months. PBS will do promos that are very similar to describe the looming reality and what it means. We'll have to fundraise against it, or we'll have to cut personnel and services that we deliver on the air. It's that simple. So we're going to wait and see. What we can't do is make things up and try to fundraise off a fake crisis, because then our credibility is shot. So I'll come to this in a minute, but this is what it looks like now. Resources to protect public media. We have a website I'll show you, but that's our position at this moment.
And talking to people about
Yes.
KCPBS and KCUR. I mean, it's always shocking to me to be reminded how few people in Kansas City know what KCUR is or know what NPR is. So there is the advocacy piece, which is, I will say, to underscore this moment, as a journalist, I am not comfortable asking people to advocate for a certain cause. This is new territory for me and for our newsroom to ask for advocacy and to advocate for ourselves on this level. So it's important that we're even asking for something like this right now. But the other thing is talking to people about what KCUR even is and what NPR is, and exposing it to more people, because I truly believe that once people start to listen or go on to kcur.org or KCPT, they'll realize the value on their own.
Question.
Brian, I'm a little confused. So the legislation way back when under Johnson created the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Yes.
Wait, now does NPR and PBS organizationally dangle down off of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting?
No.
How do those fit together?
They're separate entities. And Corporation for Public Broadcasting is, distributes their funds based on the legislation, 70% of which goes to PBS, 75% PBS, 25% to NPR. And then the rest, not the rest, then they also hold that network together that allows both of us to deliver content. So the strike in the funding would the strike in the funding would mean something to each individual station. But the bigger issue for us is the content delivery and how the network is held together.
Well, and that's where I was going with the question. So if Congress doesn't either reappropriate, continue to appropriate, or flip off the Trump administration, does that mean the end of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting if that funding is cut? That repeal the legislation?
I have seen, and either one of you tell me if you've heard anything else. I have seen several scenarios in which the corporation, they can't get rid of the corporation. They can just strike the congressional funding. The corporation could go on its own and raise funds. So that is entirely possible at that level.
Okay.
We're thinking now about just what happens if the funds are clawed back immediately. NPR, we had Catherine Marr here earlier this year, right? Yeah, earlier this year. She said, and it wasn't really off the cuff, she said, I think we can keep, if the Corporation for Public Broadcasting went away, she believes she has the ability to keep NPR afloat for 2 years. Now, that doesn't mean that she intends to shut it down. It means 2 years to redefine the business model, to figure out what it is. We don't know what that looks like. There are 100 theories out there about what it could possibly look like.
But the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, if I understood one of your first slides, was created by act of Congress.
Yes, and the funding is through Congress.
Right.
So the attempt to claw back funding, while it doesn't matter to this administration, is technically not supposed to happen that way.
Right.
But we all know about that.
Is there any strategy in the planning to have some sort of alliance between public TV and radio and commercial, and to get them to maybe get to their audience to advocate for the importance of a public media system?
We had an op-ed in the Star that posted yesterday by our CEO. I know Lisa spoke at length about local partnerships and how important they are. We are both members of the Kansas City Media Collective.
But are they on the air saying this is a good thing to support? It's good for the country. It's good, etc.
Star? Or just
KCMO, KCTV.
I don't know that they would do that. They would report on it likely, but they wouldn't impose an opinion.
I don't know, maybe some is part of their public affairs.
Something that, we might explore. It's something that I have been thinking about for KCUR is that, we've built these relationships across the local media landscape. If it came to a point, and I'm thinking, if Congress acts, right, or has a directive and plans to take a vote, and we need to kind of up the ante onto kind of, we're at this level where it's like we need advocacy, we need to sustain, but we're not going to cry wolf. When that moment comes, I could see, calling upon our partners, bringing the attention to our media partners to see if they would take a stance to advocate or to publish an editorial or call this out on their airwaves. Obviously, that would be the decision of each outlet as it finds it appropriate, but I would certainly make the case. And having public support in that would also help make the case.
You know, sort of like we're all in this together kind of thing.
And I think there, you know, I think there are certain, we are in this together. And I think if KCUR or KCPBS were to fail, that doesn't help the Kansas City Star. It doesn't help KMBC, Channel 9 News. We are all inextricably linked in this. And so I would certainly be making the case. Mhm.
So the Corporation for Public Broadcasting helps with the operating costs, but I heard NPR also talking about now you're gonna have to buy a building, fixed assets, which wouldn't really be coming from like these federal funds. How is that gonna happen? I mean, it seems like you got two issues
We do.
going on.
We do. We're going to work really hard to not have to buy a building. This is completely in the weeds, but we have some funds available that we've already raised for folks that were initially going to invest in a new building that have expressed an interest already in, let's just move those funds over and help you renovate a space that you can get for cheap. We're not going to build a palace. I'd like to. I had delusions of building a palace when I first started. Not happening.
Retrofitting a building that already exists?
It's possible. It's just anything is on the table. And if you know anything about the commercial real estate market in Kansas City right now, I get calls every single day. Hey, I've got a building. I've got something you could use here. So that all remains to be seen. But we don't need a ton of space to broadcast our signal. We need some studios. We need some equipment. We need an office for Lisa. The rest of us can figure out things on our
Maybe
own.
a window, maybe.
Yeah, a window would be nice, but we don't need an elaborate space for what we have to do. We have things we would like, but that's not the position we're in right now.
We've all seen that building they're in.
You all know.
Are some people advocating for, well, we just use the other platforms instead of the radio? I'm not advocating for that, but are people saying, oh, well, we can just go with the podcasts and do?
I will tell you, I'll tell you why I would never advocate for that.
Yeah.
The people who listen to us on the radio, and I make an assumption about the people who put eyeballs on a television set, are our best donors. So I would be putting a stake in the ground in a staff meeting if we were going down that path, because they're our most loyal consumers and they're our most loyal donors.
And there's also an access issue.
Yes,
You know,
right.
streaming and podcasts and platform require internet access. And that is, you know, it's not available in every corner of this country the way that we've built a broadcast system to be able to do. So it would be limiting for sure.
It would, yeah.
A bond, like the library bond?
You're not a,
I don't think there is, our hope is to get away from any kind of government oversight. We probably technically could as a 501c3. But I don't see that as being a possibility for us.
You know, I just think about, I do give a certain amount of money monthly to where I work out, to where I go and worship. And are we all doing that? Are we all giving to this cause? You know, that $30 or $100, what if each one of us paid $100 a month? Some of us who are retired and have it made.
Well, you can do that by calling. Or giving online at KCUR. So, and I don't mean to be glib about that. We went on air today, just hoping to do a little advocacy work. We met our initial fundraising goal within an hour and a half this morning.
good.
So people are paying attention. People are aware of the threat. obviously the best way to support both organizations is with your donations. That's how we exist. It's the biggest part of funding for both organizations. We are a public entity, and I contend we're a public good. And the best way to support us is with your philanthropic dollars, and that means different things to different people. But if it does matter to you, and I'm absolutely quoting what we say on air in our membership drives, you get to assign what value it is to you in your life. It doesn't mean that as much as your gym or your church or whatever. You get to make that decision, and we welcome your support in that way. And that is important to us.
It's kind of an odd way of looking at it. But you think there's any positive backlash to this? Because like there are people hearing about this is being cut, and it's like, what is this where they're talking about that people might get a bigger audience? It's like, what is public radio? What is this stuff?
I've actually talked about this in a meeting with other public radio leaders, which is that we are in a moment where our funding and our livelihood is threatened, but we've also never had a bigger platform, right? And so this is also the opportunity to do that education, to tell people what we do, to talk about how we're doing our work. And I'm trying to make an active effort now to go beyond just reporting and producing news stories, but also explaining how we did that news story, how we cover elections, why we do what we do, how we put together a big event, how many times we reached out to lawmakers who didn't respond and told us they couldn't come, so that we're taking advantage of this moment we're in, not just to display the good work that we're doing, but to explain how and why we do it and to build trust, right? So I think you're right.
I'll carry that one step further. We've started having conversations internally about, okay, it goes away. Maybe this is not the end of anything, but an opportunity for what's next. Now, it's not going to change that we're philanthropic unless we get a Ray Kroc or a Joan Kroc endowment worth $1 billion. It's not going to change in the short term. But we're having positive conversation, and I'll speak for our organization. There's no woe is me happening across the street. We've got a job to do. We have a product to deliver, and let's figure out how to do it no matter what comes. If we can preserve this, let's preserve it by all means. I think it's an obligation for what this was originally intended to be on the part of the federal government. Not everyone agrees with that, right? So this is an opportunity for us to look at all possibilities. I don't sense there's any woe is me going on over on 31st Street either.
I think we're just like, let's figure out how to make it through this. And, I think public media has faced threats before. I think this threat is maybe a little bit more unprecedented than others. But I think we have been longstanding institutions in Kansas City. I think we have the trust and respect of the community, a large swath of the community at least. And, again, what we were talking about earlier, I think NPR and KCPBS, we will, it will hurt, but we will survive this. I think we need to be worried about the stations that won't. Yes, that's just chipping away at access to reliable, fact-based information that will go away for a lot of people.
Very good point.
Yeah.
Fact-based is interesting.
Yes.
I think one of the things you guys need, and you probably talked about this, it's one thing for this money to be cut. It's another thing for the federal government or the administration to affirmatively attack your existence and what you stand for. And so in that regard, being prepared to somehow advocate for yourselves or have the community advocate for what you have done and continue to do, I think is an extremely important thing beyond fundraising.
Absolutely. And here, let's see. Let's see if the link.
How'd I do?
Okay, so if you just write down protectmypublicmedia.org, can you?
Maybe. It's right here. Yeah, on the front.
Right. Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
It's on here. Anyway.
There we go.
Go ahead and pass them out.
Yeah.
Register.
That's the
That's
seven
a-
flyer.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, that's some-
So this is a nice interactive website. A fair warning, they will send updates to you as the legislation is happening, but it gives you resources about where to go for this topic at the national level.
I don't know, they may not. be-
There are scripts and templates, and if you click the orange button, it will literally fill it in for you and you can send it. And it will find your
Yes,
your lawmaker.
you can,
It makes it as easy as possible to advocate on our behalf, so it's a great resource.
So are you finding local legislative support as opposed to Marjorie Taylor Greene attacking the organizations from either Missouri or Kansas perspective?
yeah, I got this. We have friendly people in the House that directly represent Kansas City. It is not the same on the fringes of Kansas City. Our broadcast area is about 90 miles. And you can kind of do the math there and think about who represents those outlying areas on both sides of the state line and think about where that is. However, as someone who spent time advocating for causes, I can tell you, it can feel like banging your head against the wall with people who don't support. It's also important for the folks who are friendly to us to affirm that there are people here who support us as well. So both acts are important. We have a couple of people. Senator Moran is on appropriations in the Senate.
Is he friendly?
I haven't seen a specific position statement from him.
He doesn't do a very good job.
He has not been hostile.
He's not been hostile to
No.
us.
He's been.
Well, that's what he is. He's not, he's.
Yeah. But he is on appropriations and that matters. So this is a good resource. The websites for both of our stations, you'll find a donate button there. You'll also find our reporting as well. So our understanding of what's happening will be included there, and that's a good resource for all of these things.
I want to thank you. I have to slip out to my next meeting, but it's been a real pleasure and it's been great to be in this room. I thank you, Lisa. Last to the party, first to leave.
Sir.
Can I ask a viewership question? On PBS, when Masterpiece is on, for instance, there's a red screen and then in the background, they have all of the programs that have ever been, the titles of them come up for like Poldark and all the little tiny ones and everything.
Yeah.
And none of those are available for you to watch on Passport. Is that because they're so old that you couldn't broadcast them anymore? And if you could broadcast them, could you make them for rent? Could you monetize them by like, oh, I never did, I was too young and I was snotty and didn't watch that. Now I'd like to watch it. I'd pay $5 or $10 a month extra to watch whatever it might be.
So everything that you see on PBS is created by a member station. They don't, or an outside production company. PBS does not create any content. And so along with that, they're a funnel to the various stations. So along with that, I could go in at length into broadcast rights, but it's a limited time. We're negotiating, they're negotiating to keep prices down so that we can continue to pay our dues. So it's likely that if they're not available in Passport, which is the paid version of our app, that we don't have the rights to stream. A lot of things also, I will say with the transition into streaming, that a lot of things maybe we have broadcast rights for, but like Midsummer Murders, we can't stream that. We don't even have an option to purchase streaming rights. So if there are specific things that you would like to see, sometimes we as a station can independently make those purchases. So I would suggest sending in through our communications email. We do, I mean, when we get requests, we look into things. So I get those emails personally. So you will be emailing me directly along with my team. But we always do consider those things, especially if there's a large appetite for them. So feel free. I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer for you.
I just always wondered about that. It just seems like there's a treasure trove of programming that's sitting in a cave somewhere, I guess.
I know.
You might have a chance at monetizing it.
Yeah, we don't own
Right.
any of those shows. Yeah, I know. We can also make suggestions to PBS. You know, we can email up and make suggestions.
There is PBS Select, which is a streaming service that is available via Amazon.
Mhm.
And a lot of that programming is available on PBS Select.
Mhm. And there is information on how to access that on our website, the Amazon.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway.
And Amazon gets some money. So we're not helping.
The underwriter.
Just to coordinate with the public schools and have packets and things for some of your educational programs?
We do,
You do,
yes. We
yeah.
have an education department. Our education director works closely with KC Public Schools and many other local schools on any number of workshops and programs. Is there?
You went away, that would go away?
Yes.
So are the public schools willing to advocate for you?
That's a good question. I don't know. We definitely could mobilize at least the teachers.
Yeah,
Because they love us. Of course.
And we've been sending, from the KCUR perspective, we have a partnership with the Kansas City Public Library, and we do too, don't we? They have done some low-level advocacy for us.
So the setup's going to take a little bit, but I promise there's a question at the end. A lot of your collaborations at KCUR, you've talked about the networks for rural health, rural agriculture issues, social issues, are probably grant supported.
Yes.
And what Doge has done very efficiently is clawed back grants at a phenomenal rate with no idea of what they do.
Yes.
So you say, we're not going to yell until they do something. Have they done that?
Not with our collaborations, because all of our collaborations are independent foundations and philanthropies as opposed to government. We don't, make sure I don't say overstep here. None of our on-air collaborative work has government funding behind it. It's all independent foundations or private philanthropy. So not yet. There are threats coming out of the White House to national foundations, labeling them as terrorist supporting organizations if they don't like the content. And that has been widely reported. It has not affected us to date.
For PBS, we do, all of our current grant funds have been dispersed, so we were not, they can't take them away because CPB has them.
Yeah.
We work with Kansas, so we already have all that funding. I will say that there is a group of stations that have gone through a FEMA grant submission to upgrade equipment for emergency services. And unfortunately, those funds were cut before they were distributed. A lot of those stations had already invested a lot of their own money and infrastructure to support these transmitter upgrades or technology upgrades that yes, absolutely, that's happening.
That's
And
terrible.
It
That's
really
perhaps
is.
the most defensive. So, right.
Yes.
Well, Leanne, thank you for inviting us to be here today.
Thank you.
Thank you all of you.
Thank you so much for being here today.